Welcome into this week's edition of RNN Talks right here on Racing News Now. I'm your host, Garth Allen. Thanks for joining me once again today for RNN Talks, where we talk only the topics that you want to hear about in the world of motorsports. Today we are joined once again by our Autotech correspondent, Andrew Moore, as well as introducing our IndyCar correspondent, Tom Poole. We have an interesting topic to talk with them about that has cropped up recently in the world of NASCAR, but I think is something that might be of interest to talk about in terms of other motorsports as well. So without further ado, let's get to that chat, and we'll see what Andrew and Tom think. And we are now joined by our Autotech correspondent, Andrew Moore, as well as introducing our IndyCar correspondent, Tom Poole. We got one thing to talk about tonight, and it's a conversation that has sprung up in the past week or so in the NASCAR world specifically, but we don't necessarily have to talk about it just with NASCAR. I feel like this is something we can talk about across other forms of motorsports as well. And that is the idea of franchising the sport. NASCAR has already kind of franchised the sport in a way. They have the charter system now to where if you have a charter that NASCAR has given out, you are locked into every race as long as you have a charter. And there are requirements to get a charter, like you have to have run the full season for, I believe it's the past 5 seasons, as well as some other requirements as well. But the topic has come up of whether NASCAR should completely franchise the sport and do as most other sports have done, whereas, say, I couldn't put together a team right now and go play the Cleveland Cavaliers or the Dallas Mavericks or something. Couldn't go play basketball. I'd have to get a franchise from the NBA. And I want to get your guys' take on, do you think that would be a good idea with NASCAR or with IndyCar or with any other form of motorsports?
I don't believe so. And I mean, the thing that I kind of go back to, and it's a different scale because it's not weekly and it's more based off just show up when you do sprint cars. I mean, you see it at the local dirt tracks and stuff like that, and that kind of brings up excitement in itself and promotes the races a little bit better is when you see a larger car count or something like that. And specifically here in the Midwest, we're used to Indiana Sprint Week, and that's what kind of brings a lot of cars, and that gets everybody talking at the track before is, how many people are they going to show up? How many cars are going to show up? You can't really limit it, I feel, because and I've never really liked considering racing and comparing it to sports like stick and ball sports like basketball, baseball, football, hockey, things like that, because it's totally different. When they were talking about in the NFL and the NBA putting sponsorships on jerseys and saying, oh, well, NASCAR does it. Well, the problem is NASCAR, the teams are like the actual NFL teams. They don't have stadiums and stuff that they can put their sponsorships on. The only thing that NASCAR teams can put their sponsorships on are their cars. So it's totally different in that sense. And with that being said, the price tag at running at races and stuff in racing are way higher than other sports and things like that, because you don't have ticket sales coming in. You don't have facility costs coming in and covering things. Merchandise a little bit, but merchandise is kind of split more through NASCAR and stuff like that. So, you really don't have as much income coming in racing than you do in other sports. So therefore, I think that they would hinder it if they did do this franchise tag. You've already seen it go down, the typical car count from 43 in the starting field to now 40. And the reason they're having this debate is because, now they're starting to get 37, 36, 35 cars in. But if they actually, if they do implement it, it's not going to have the effect that they think it will. It's actually going to hinder the sport even more. because these teams, that don't have a lot of money, if they crash, what's going to happen? If they crash out in Daytona, which is such a crapshoot that, I know you talked about last week. I mean, what's going to happen there? They just kind of shot themselves in the foot. So they're going to be a little more reluctant to get into this sport because, they could be in a lot of financial hardship if something happens out of their control in Daytona. And now this rule. So then you might start seeing, 30 cars and stuff like that in your franchise tag. And so, yeah, you've got a fixed number of cars, but, it's not any better than what you got right now, which is what the problem is.
Well, and I tend to agree with you, Tom, but I'm going to play a little bit of devil's advocate here, and let's think about if NASCAR were to do this, and I'm going to preface this by saying NASCAR themselves haven't publicly talked about doing this. This is just something that has cropped up within the NASCAR media world and the fan community recently as talks of should this be done. If they were to do this, I think the correct way to do this would be to take away the cap on how many cars each team can have. That way you're not necessarily limiting yourself on how big your field can be. You could still have a 40-car limit on the field, but we'll say Joe Gibbs Racing isn't necessarily limited to 4 cars anymore. If Joe Gibbs Racing has enough money, they can field a 5th, 6th, 7th car if they wanted to. So in essence, you could keep your current field sizes as long as your teams have the money to put the cars out there on the track.
All right, so I've been listening to the two of you kind of banter back and forth here. And when I think of a franchise, I immediately take the NFL or the NBA, for example. All right, those are sports in which there are franchises that compete against each other. So let's say if NASCAR were to do that specifically, all right, so they've kind of, the way the teams are set up, it's kind of like a franchise where you work your way up, and there are people that say, I just dream of driving for Hendrick Motorsports for NASCAR. All right. That would be no different than me saying, I dream of playing football for the New England Patriots or whatever. So you work your way up and prove yourself to get on that team. But the way that you work your way through the system is totally different. So if you want to make it more like a stick and ball sport or something like that, you'd have to rearrange all of the lower end races and the series like that. So you, instead of having the trucks and the Xfinity and then Sprint Cup, having owners of the Sprint Cup teams also have partial ownership of some of the younger series, then it would have to be like high school, college, and professional sports. So you'd start out at the bottom, all right? So like high school sports would be the trucks or something like that. They're their own separate entity or something like that. Then after you're done there, you could get like selected to, or you could like commit to a different team up there. Like let's say you can run in this series for a certain amount of time, and after a certain number of years, then you kind of have to commit, and you can either stop racing or you can move up, which would be like playing college ball in the Xfinity series. And then from there, you could get drafted to go to the Sprint Cup series. And they're like, the teams would have scouting recruits and stuff like that go into the Xfinity races saying, I like the way these drivers work. Let's see if we can't get them on our team, hold a draft, get them there. Now, the biggest problem with making it a franchise is the franchise teams for professional sports that involve sticks and balls and stuff. They have their own stadiums that people come to. Racing doesn't have their own stadiums that they have people come to. The stadiums bring the races to them. So that'd be like if I built a football stadium, but whoever wanted to play football could come to it. That'd be no different than playing ball in the park. So Hendrick Motorsports doesn't have a specific racetrack in which they can go and get all their money from when people show up. So like the Colts get ticket sales and concessions and stuff. Some of that, like a portion of all that money goes back to them, and racing teams don't have that benefit per se. So it's just whoever whoever's racetrack, they say, hey, you can come race here, then you can go race there. But as of right now, it's kind of 50-50. You have the somewhat of a franchise thing with the different teams, but if you want to do like a full franchise like transition, and I feel like the lower classes would have to change the way they work.
Well, and they kind of already are like that in the sense that you mentioned the Cup teams couldn't have their own teams in the lower series. Certain Cup teams do that already. So Hendrick Motorsports does not have an Xfinity Series team, but Junior Motorsports is an Xfinity Series team that is related. I guess I don't know what the correct word here is. I'm having a brain fart, but what's that?
It'd be a feeder series.
There you go. Yeah. So Junior Motorsports is basically the Hendrick Motorsports arm in the Xfinity series. It's not Hendrick Motorsports, but it's basically Hendrick Motorsports. So I think in essence you would end up having something like that where it's not Hendrick Motorsports in name in the lower series, but it would still basically be Hendrick Motorsports. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, pretty much. Racing is a business, all right? It'd be like if you decided you wanted to start an ice cream parlor. You build your little hut on the side of the road. You start out small, selling ice cream, just like a lemonade stand, and eventually you get bigger and you have more employees. That would be like if you were a race team owner and you got bigger and you were able to have 2 drivers now instead of 1. Now that you have 2 drivers, you have more income from sponsors and stuff. They're out there racing. The more successful that you get, the bigger your business grows. Then you get to the point where Hendricks and Joe Gibbs and Penske and stuff like that. Now your business has succeeded to the point where you are a large business. You can afford more things, and you have more employees. Your drivers are your employees. So that's the way NASCAR is run now. It's a business. So you could have a franchise, but I think the way it is right now works. I mean, racing's an expensive business to get into. You have to have a lot of startup. Cars aren't cheap to make. Sponsors are hard to come by. And the way you get more sponsors is by having someone who's good at racing drive your car. The more successful your car is, the more sponsors you get. The more sponsors you get, then bigger name sponsors will start flooding in. And it's just, you got to start somewhere, and that's always the bottom.
No, I agree with you. But and again, I'm kind of playing devil's advocate here. Would it necessarily be much different if they were to switch to this franchise system? I mean, would it really be that much different in a business sense if you only had, because the way I see it, if they were to go to a franchise system, you would, at least in the beginning, you would only have, say, your Chip Ganassi, your Team Penske, your Richard Childress, Stuart Haas, Hendrick, Joe Gibbs. Your teams like that would be your only teams in the Monster Energy NASCAR Cup Series. Would it be really all that much different for them from a business standpoint than it is right now?
I think it would scare, because it's an investment that you have to make. And it's kind of the point that I said again, if, you know, I don't know what you want to call NASCAR in this equation, but, you know, it's kind of, it wouldn't be the smartest business move for NASCAR to force these guys in, because, you know, without these teams, you know, and this is the problem that they're seeing right now, is these teams aren't seeing the benefit of running a full season or going out and putting all their equipment on the line and stuff like that. So they're doing that by their choice now. So what NASCAR is going to do is they're just going to force their hand and say, look, you either race with us all season long or you don't race with us at all. And these teams that are, you know, coming in for specific races, they're just going to fold completely. I said, so if you're having a problem with cars, if you're having a problem with the 36 car count, then this is definitely not the fix for you, because I see this resulting in, you know, striking down to 28, 30, 32 cars. Because what's going to happen is you're just going to have the more competitive guys. And like you said earlier, if you lift the restriction on how many cars each team can have, and Hendrick and Gibbs and all the powerhouses start putting out more car counts, it's going to kill these younger guys because, one, they're not going to have the talent to come in. Some of these younger guys like Greg Goulding and guys like that are, it happened with Alex Bowman. I mean, he got a ride there with, what was it, BK Motorsports? That's kind of how he started.
Tommy Baldwin Racing.
Okay, and then it kind of evolved, and then now here he is sitting in Hendrick, and he has a really good shot week in and week out. So in what Andrew was saying is talking about you start in sprints, then you work your way up to K&N, work your way up to ARCA, trucks, Xfinity, and here you are in the Cup. And it's not like some guys like Eric Jones and things can jump straight into whatever and William Byron and things and not miss a step, but some of those guys need those lower teams, and you're going to hurt that because you won't have that development, and you're going to miss that spot. But I feel that what's going to happen is it's just going to scare people away, and it's almost like an investor. These teams are investing in NASCAR, and if NASCAR is saying, look, it's either all of us or none of us, then these guys that are kind of on the fence aren't going to go, oh, well, we'll do it anyway. That's going to scare them away, and they're going to shy away, and I go to the track.
Here's a pretty good comparison. All right. So sure, you could think about it the way that I had just said, and it'd be like if you wanted to start a burger joint, and Hendrick Motorsports is like McDonald's, and you're trying to compete with them. All right. That's almost impossible. But these younger guys, just like when you go to sprint races, you have the people who are serious, and they have a lot of sponsors and a lot of money, and they travel to all of the races throughout the season. But you also have the local guys that will only go to a couple races when they're close to where they live because they can't afford to travel far. Those people are the equivalent of a practice squad. And the practice squad is what helps make the other, or the starter, the first team, better. All right. If you think about the NBA, the NFL, NHL, any of those, if they have no one to practice against, then they can never make themselves better. So the reason we have teams like Hendrick and Penske and Joe Gibbs and stuff that are so successful is because of the younger guys out there training the other guys to get better. They're just practice. They're not going to win the race or anything like that. They're just the practice squad.
In racing terms too, to kind of tie what he's talking about into a little bit more of the racing church, because I see his point here, but what it is, like the starting.
Garth looks confused. Say something so the camera switches to your face so the audience can see your confusion.
What I'm saying is, what he's basically saying is, it's like the starting park cars. The starting parks for many years, they'd go to the track, they'd run 5 or 6 laps, and then they'd park. Well, what they were doing is they were trying to accumulate sponsorship money to actually run. So it's one of those investment things that, you can't just jump straight in like some of the big powerhouses like Hendricks and things like those. Some of these teams, like the sprint car guys that, don't have a lot of money, that just kind of show up, 5 or 6 races a year, they're going out and they're just trying to get some points, get a little extra cash. Maybe something happens and, they hit a little luck and they get out of their qualifying heats and they get a little extra money or something. And then that's going to pay for new tires or new something else. So then they can be competitive. So, it's a business. These teams that go in there that run, 38th, 39th every weekend, or the starting park teams that take 5 laps around, you think that's exactly what they want to do? I mean, it's not, but it's a process. They just don't have the money that Hendrick has. They don't have the money that Gibbs has, and that's how they go about it. They
think about this. Racing is similar to boxing. Okay? Again, you look really confused. But how much money do you, on tomorrow's, I say tomorrow, we're recording this at like 2 a.m. Sunday's race at Atlanta, how much money is the winning driver going to receive for finishing the race?
Yeah, I don't know offhand. You kind of threw that one at me. I can look it up.
They don't win that much. They get maybe a couple $1,000, maybe tens of thousands of dollars, or even $100,000.
The driver, right?
Yeah, the driver
The
himself.
guy that wins the cup race only gets a couple $1,000s. I don't think that's an accurate.
He's not saying the purse. He's saying what the driver's winnings for that, because they only get 5-10%.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying.
That's what he's talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. Winning the race, you don't actually get that much money. Where all the money, just like boxing, comes from sponsorship. All right. So having a successful team does not mean you win a lot of races. It means you have the biggest sponsors. So these starting park people, some of them could actually be bringing in quite a lot of money just from their sponsorships alone. Who cares that they only ran like 10 laps? Their sponsors are giving them enough money to keep them afloat. It's just like, you ever been to Truck and Tractor Pull? The winner of a Truck and Tractor Pull gets, maybe, depending on how big the event is, $600. Do you know how much it costs to build one of those tractors?
A lot.
$200,000 for one of those tractors. Then you break it and you have to rebuild it. That's another couple $100,000. But the fact that people show up there and they only get $600 if they happen to win, that's not enough money to justify the sport. So for a lot of these people, it's just a hobby.
And we want to thank our Auto Tech correspondent, Andrew Moore, as well as our IndyCar correspondent, Tom Poole, for coming on and joining us tonight to talk about the possibility of having a completely franchised NASCAR in the future, as well as other forms of motorsport possibly going that way as well. So we want to thank them once again for coming on tonight and having a great discussion with us. All right, so before we wrap up, we got to do the thing we do every week, and that is make predictions for this week's racing events. And for this weekend, that is 3 NASCAR races. All 3 NASCAR National Series are in action from the Las Vegas Motor Speedway this weekend. We'll start off with the Truck Series, the inaugural Stratosphere 200 from Vegas. And you know, I learned my lesson last week. I know there's going to be a lot of people that aren't very happy with this pick, and I completely understand, but I don't know how you can pick against Kyle Busch when he is in a truck race. Especially after last week, he dominated the whole race pretty much and had those problems late in the race with the tire. I think that motivates him even more this week to come back and win in Vegas to get his 50th Truck Series victory. Kyle Busch wins the Stratosphere 200 from Las Vegas Motor Speedway. Now, moving on to the Xfinity Series, we have the 22nd Annual Boyd Gaming 300 on Saturday afternoon. And you know what? I am not going to go with a Cup regular in this one, although that would be the easy choice. Kyle Busch is in this race as well, so he would probably be the easy choice in this one. But I'm not going to go with that. Kyle Larson is also in this race in the 42 car. That one would be another one that would probably be considered an easy choice. I'm not going to go with that one either. For the Boyd Gaming 300, I am going to pick Christopher Bell. He had a fantastic run last week in Atlanta. Had easily the best run of any Xfinity Series regular in the race. I think he takes that momentum into this weekend and picks up his first Xfinity Series win of 2018 in that 20 car for Joe Gibbs Racing. Now for the Monster Energy NASCAR Cup Series, the 21st Annual Pennzoil 400, also from Las Vegas Motor Speedway on Sunday afternoon. I'm going to go with Brad Keselowski for this one. He has a great history with Las Vegas. He's had a great start to the season. Had Kevin Harvick not been Kevin Harvick last weekend, I could have easily seen Keselowski picking up the victory in Atlanta. So I think Keselowski picks up the second win in a row for Ford this week and continues his hot start to the season, and continues really the hot start to the season for Team Penske as a whole. Brad Keselowski wins the Pennzoil 400 in Las Vegas this weekend. So I think that'll do it for us tonight. Thank you for joining me once again tonight. It is always a pleasure to get to talk to you. Don't forget to subscribe if you're not already. Leave a like on the video. It is much appreciated. And don't forget to support us on Patreon. That is patreon.com/racingnewsnow. Any little bit helps, and it will continue to help us grow and bring you better and better quality content into the future. So with that, this has been RNN Talks. I will see you Monday for Pole Position. I'm Garth Allen for Racing News Now.